The sound of champagne glasses clinking, of laughter like shattering crystal, of whispers that slithered through the ballroom like snakes. Hold that sound in your mind, because this is the sound of a world about to break. The grand ballroom of the Ethelstan Hotel was a cathedral of arrogance. 1,000 crystal shards in the chandelier overhead cast fractured light on even more fractured souls. The air was thick with the scent of imported lilies and expensive ambition. And at the center of it all stood Alara, in a dress the color of midnight, feeling more like a ghost than a guest of honor. This was her engagement party. Or rather, it was her family's victory lap. "To my daughter Alara," her father, Robert Vance, boomed, his voice echoing in the marbled hall, a glass of Dom Perignon raised high. "And to her brilliant future with Julian Ashworth, a union of not just two hearts but two empires." The crowd erupted in applause. Julian, standing beside Alara, squeezed her hand. His grip was possessive, his smile a perfect, polished weapon. He was everything her world demanded. Heir to the Ashworth conglomerate, impeccably dressed, predictably handsome. A trophy husband for a trophy daughter. But Alara's eyes weren't on Julian. They were scanning the periphery of the room, past the sea of tuxedos and silk, searching for a quieter shadow. "Looking for your stray, darling." Julian's whisper was a venomous caress against her ear. "I'm surprised security even let him in. Then again, even vermin need to witness greatness." A cold knot tightened in Alara's stomach. Then she saw him. Kai. He stood alone near a towering floral arrangement, a stark contrast to the gilded spectacle. He wore a simple dark suit that was clearly not designer, his hands tucked into his pockets. He wasn't poor in the desperate sense, but in the way her world defined it. He had no name, no legacy, no visible portfolio. He was a freelance tech consultant, a man who built things with code instead of capital. And he was the man she loved. Their eyes met across the room. In his gaze, she didn't see the hunger that flickered in every other pair of eyes here. She saw a quiet harbor, a home. It was that look that had given her the courage, 3 days ago, to call off her engagement to Julian and choose Kai. The scandal had been nuclear. And now the fallout was beginning. Julian, sensing her distraction, raised his voice again, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Actually, everyone, while we're all here, let's have a toast to resilience. To those who dare to dream far, far above their station." The crowd tittered, following his gaze to Kai. The mockery was a palpable force, a wave of heat and contempt. Alara's mother, Eleanor, materialized beside her, hissing under her breath. "Stop staring at him, Alara. You're making a spectacle of yourself. Again." "I'm in love with him, mother," Alara whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "Love?" Eleanor Vance let out a short, brittle laugh. "Love doesn't fill bank accounts, darling. It doesn't maintain yachts or secure board seats. That man, he has nothing to offer you but a life of struggle and humiliation. Look around. This is your life. Don't throw it away for a fantasy." The words were lances, expertly aimed. Alara felt the eyes of her so-called friends, the pitying smiles of society matrons, the outright laughter from Julian's cronies. The room began to spin, the opulence turning suffocating. Then Julian decided to go in for the kill. He strode towards Kai, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. "Kai, was it?" Julian's voice carried, silencing the orchestra of whispers. "I must admit I admire your audacity, showing up here, after everything." Kai didn't flinch. He simply looked at Julian, his expression unreadable, a calm depth in a sea of shallow turmoil. "I'm here for Alara." "For Alara," Julian laughed, a loud, hollow sound. "And what precisely can you do for her? Can you give her this?" He gestured to the obscenely lavish ballroom. "Can you protect her name from becoming a laughingstock? Can you provide her with anything other than vague promises?" The silence was deafening. Every ear was straining, every eye was wide with morbid curiosity. Kai's gaze never wavered from Julian's. When he spoke, his voice was low, but it cut through the thick air like a blade. I can give her what you never could, my truth. Julian scoffed. Truth. The truth is you are a nobody, a temporary distraction. You will be forgotten by next season, while Ilara and I will be building a dynasty. Ilara couldn't take it anymore. She pushed through the crowd, her heart hammering against her ribs. She stopped beside Kai, slipping her hand into his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, a silent anchor in the storm. The only distraction here, Julian, is you, Ilara said, her voice clear and strong, carrying across the ballroom. My choice is made, it's Kai. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Her father's face was purple with rage. Her mother looked as if she'd been slapped. Julian's smile finally vanished, replaced by a mask of cold fury. You're choosing a man who can't even afford the shoes on his feet over me. You're a fool, Ilara. And you, he turned his venomous glare to Kai, you are a parasite. You cling to a woman so far out of your league it's pathetic. Enjoy your moment in the sun. It will be your last. The humiliation was complete. It was a public flaying, layer by layer, until all that was left was her raw, beating love for Kai, exposed for everyone to mock. But as the laughter and whispers rose again, a final, defiant thought echoed in Ilara's mind, a silent scream against the tide of their scorn. But that night, the man they called worthless had already bought everything they stood on. Pause here and feel that. The weight of their laughter, the sting of their judgment. Now I want you to ask yourself, listener, would you have the courage to stand there, hand in hand with the one you love, while the whole world points and laughs? Could you bear that weight for a love that everyone else has deemed worthless? Think about it. Your answer matters. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. The society blogs had a field day. Vance heiress loses her mind, one headline screamed. From billion-dollar bride to pauper's mistress, sneered another. Her phone blew up with calls from concerned friends whose concern always seemed to mask a gleeful schadenfreude. Her family's penthouse, once a symbol of ultimate security, became a gilded cage. Her father refused to speak to her, communicating only through icy glares. Her mother launched into a constant, tearful campaign. It's not too late, Ilara, Alina pleaded one morning over a breakfast neither of them touched. We can fix this. We'll say you were unwell under stress. Julian is willing to take you back. He's a gentleman. A gentleman. Ilara laughed, the sound brittle. He publicly humiliated me, mother. He humiliated the man I love. That's not a gentleman, that's a bully. He was hurt, her mother countered. And for God's sake, look at the alternative. What do you even know about this Kai? He lives in a rented apartment in the city. He has no family to speak of. His entire life is a mystery. What if he's just after your money? The doubt, a seed planted by Julian, had taken root in her mother's mind and was now trying to worm its way into her own. It was the most insidious weapon they had. What did she really know about Kai? She knew he made her tea exactly how she liked it, with a drop of honey and a slice of lemon. She knew he had a quiet, intelligent laugh that made her feel like she'd solved the world's hardest puzzle. She knew he listened, truly listened, when she spoke about her dreams of starting her own art foundation, not just her father's business. She knew his touch could silence the cacophony of her anxieties. But the world demanded ledgers, not feelings. It demanded a pedigree, not a presence. The pressure mounted. A cousin accidentally sent her a spreadsheet comparing Julian's net worth to the estimated median income of a tech consultant. Her best friend since childhood, Chloe, took her for coffee and spent an hour detailing the social suicide Ilara was committing. I'm just worried about you, Ella, Chloe said, her hand covering Ilara. Love is wonderful, but it doesn't pay the bills. And let's be real, this kind of love, it's a fantasy. It doesn't survive in the real world. You'll grow to resent him. He'll grow to feel inadequate. It's a tragedy waiting to happen. Ilara went home that night and stared at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window of her bedroom. The city glittered below, a landscape of cold, hard light and even harder realities. A single, treacherous thought escaped its cage in her mind. Are they right? I need you to be honest with me now. Have you ever been there, standing at a crossroads with every single person you trust telling you to take one path while your heart is screaming for the other? That voice of doubt, it's a whisper that can become a roar. Can it? She called Kai. His voice, calm and steady, was a lifeline. "Hey," he said softly. "Rough day." "The worst," she whispered, tears finally spilling over. "They're all against." The air in the Ethelstan Grand Ballroom was different today. The scent of champagne and lilies had been replaced by the sterile aroma of power, polished wood, black coffee, and cold ambition. This was not a party, it was a coliseum. Shareholders, executives, and journalists filled the tiered seats, a low hum of anticipation buzzing under the stark, modern lighting. In the front row, flanked by lawyers and sycophants, sat Robert Vance and Julian Ashworth. They looked like kings awaiting tribute. Alara slipped into a seat at the very back, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She was a ghost here, unseen in the dim light, a stark contrast to the woman in the midnight blue dress from just weeks before. She scanned the raised dais at the front. The chairman of Ethelstan, a man named Sterling, looked pale and tense. The seat next to him, reserved for the representative of K-Quest, was empty. Julian leaned over and whispered something to her father. Robert Vance nodded, a smug, satisfied smile gracing his lips. They thought the empty chair was a sign of weakness. They thought K-Quest was having second thoughts, perhaps spooked by the rumors Julian had so carefully planted. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chairman Sterling began, tapping the microphone, "thank you for your patience. We are awaiting the arrival of the principal representative from K-Quest Holdings to finalize the acquisition terms. We expect him shortly." A murmur went through the crowd. Him, so it was a man. "Probably some geriatric hedge fund shark from Zurich," Julian muttered, just loud enough for those around him to hear. "All cloak and dagger, it's tiresome." Alara's palms were damp. She clutched the edge of her seat, her eyes fixed on the main doors. "Meet me here," Kai had said, "please." Where was he? Had something happened? Had Julian's sabotage worked? The doors remained shut. The clock on the wall ticked past noon. The murmur grew into a restless rumble. Chairman Sterling mopped his brow with a handkerchief. And then a different door opened. A small, discreet entrance to the side of the dais, used by staff. A figure stepped through. He was dressed not in a simple, off-the-rack suit, but in an impeccably tailored midnight black Tom Ford that hugged his shoulders and spoke of silent, exorbitant cost. His posture was different, erect, commanding, the quiet humility she knew replaced by an innate, unshakable authority. He moved with a predator's grace, his eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail, every face before finally, inevitably, landing on hers. It was Kai. A gasp caught in Alara's throat, so loud in the sudden, absolute silence that had fallen over the room. It was as if all the air had been sucked out. He didn't smile. He didn't acknowledge her. He simply walked to the empty chair on the dais and stood behind it, his hands resting lightly on its back. The entire board of Ethelstan shifted in their seats, their body language screaming deference. Robert Vance's smug smile had frozen, then cracked, then shattered completely. His face was a mask of utter, profound confusion. He looked from Kai to Julian, his mind visibly refusing to compute the data his eyes were providing. Julian was worse. All the color had drained from his face. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost he had personally taunted and tried to destroy. His mouth hung slightly open, his hands gripping the arms of his chair as if he were on a crashing plane. Chairman Sterling practically leaped to his feet. "Ah, our principal has arrived. Ladies and gentlemen of the Ethelstan Group, esteemed shareholders and guests, it is my profound honor to introduce the visionary behind K-Quest Holdings, the man who will be guiding our company into its next, most prosperous era." He turned to Kai, his body bowed in a slight, involuntary gesture of respect. Kai's gaze swept over the stunned audience, past the gaping mouths and wide eyes, past her father's apoplectic confusion, past Julian's petrified horror. He let the silence stretch, letting the weight of his true presence, crush the room. He leaned ever so slightly towards the microphone. His voice, when it came, was the same calm, steady baritone she loved, but it was now layered with a resonance of absolute, unquestionable power. It filled the vast space without effort. "Thank you, Charles," he said, his tone cool, conversational. He paused again, his eyes finding Alara's once more, holding her captive in that gaze for a heart-stopping second before returning to the room at large. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a king reclaiming his throne. "It seems there has been some confusion regarding my identity. Allow me to clear that up." He leaned in closer to the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Kairos Thorn, but you may call me K-Quest." The silence broke. It wasn't a loud break. It was the sound of 100 paradigms shifting at once, a collective, shuddering intake of breath, the rustle of expensive fabric as people recoiled in their seats, a choked, guttural sound from Julian Ashworth that was half sob, half denial. Kairos Thorn. The name itself was a legend. The boy genius who had created a revolutionary AI trading algorithm, sold his first company for 9 figures at 19, and then vanished from the public eye, building an empire so vast and so private that most considered him a myth, a ghost, a rumor. And he had been there all along, in their midst, the man they had called a parasite, a pauper, a nobody. Alara felt the world tilt on a new, impossible axis. Kairos Thorn. The names crashed together in her mind, the simple, strong name she knew, and the mythical, powerful one the world feared. They were the same person. The man who made her tea with honey was the same man who could, with a single word, dismantle her father's life's work. He hadn't been hiding in the shadows. He had been standing in plain sight, and they had been too blinded by their own prejudice to see him. Kairos continued, his voice cutting through the din of shocked whispers. "The acquisition of Ethelstan will proceed as planned. My team has already begun the integration process. There will, however, be changes to the board, effective immediately." He named a few names, respected, powerful names. Then his gaze, cool and impartial, landed on Robert Vance and Julian Ashworth. "Mr. Vance, Mr. Ashworth, your seats at this table are hereby vacated. Your shares will be purchased at a fair market value. You are no longer a part of this company's future." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a decree, delivered with the calm finality of a guillotine's blade. Robert Vance looked as if he'd been physically struck. He slumped in his chair, all his bluster and arrogance deflated, leaving behind a shell of a man. Julian simply stared, his face a grotesque canvas of rage, humiliation, and a dawning, primal fear. Kairos Thorn's eyes found Alara again. This time there was no cool distance. This time his gaze was a raw, open wound, filled with a vulnerability she had never seen in him before. It was a look that said, "This is who I am, the man and the myth. Do you still want me?" And in that moment, amidst the ruins of her old life and the shocking revelation of his true power, Alara knew her answer. She didn't see a billionaire or a myth. She saw the man who had chosen to love her from the shadows, protecting her from the very storm he was now so masterfully commanding. She saw Kai, and she gave him the smallest, most imperceptible nod. The corner of his mouth lifted in a genuine, relieved smile. It was a flicker of sunlight through a hurricane. Then he turned back to the stunned audience, all business once more. "The meeting is adjourned. My CFO will handle the particulars." He didn't wait for a response. He stepped away from the dais and began to walk, not towards the staff exit but down the central aisle, directly towards her. The crowd parted for him like he was Moses, a sea of stunned faces and whispered exclamations. He didn't look left or right. His eyes were locked on her. He stopped before her seat. The entire room was watching, a silent, captivated audience to their private drama. He didn't say a word. He simply extended his hand. Alara looked at his hand, then up into his eyes. The eyes of the man she loved. The eyes of Kairos Thorn. They were the same. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, firm, and familiar. He gently pulled her to her feet, and together they turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the silence, the ruin, and the shattered pride of their past behind them. Can you imagine that walk? The sound of their footsteps echoing in that cavernous, silent room, the weight of 1,000 stares on their backs. He didn't gloat, he didn't even look at them. His entire world in that moment was the woman whose hand he held. That, my friends, is not just power. That is poetry. But I have to ask you what happens after the fairy tale reveal, when the masks come off and you're left with the real, complicated person underneath. Is the love strong enough to survive the truth? The car that waited for them was a silent, armored Rolls-Royce, a world away from the modest sedan Kai usually drove. The driver, a severe-looking man in an impeccably tailored suit, held the door open without a word. The interior was a tomb of polished wood and soft leather, so quiet Alara could hear the frantic beat of her own heart. The door closed, sealing them in this new alien reality. The engine purred to life, a vibration more felt than heard, and the car pulled away from the curb, gliding through the city as if it were a ghost. For a full minute, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with everything that had just happened, with everything that had been hidden. Alara stared straight ahead, watching the familiar streets of her life blur past the tinted window, now rendered strange and insignificant. The Vance Tower, her father's monument to himself, shrank in the rearview mirror. She could feel Kai's eyes on her, waiting, patient. The same patience he had shown for months, but now she understood it wasn't the patience of a humble man. It was the patience of a predator who knew the hunt was already won. Finally, she turned to him. The tailored suit, the aura of absolute control, it was like looking at a stranger wearing her lover's face. Kairos Thorn, she whispered, the name feeling foreign and heavy on her tongue. It's just a name, Alara, he said, his voice soft, stripping away the corporate authority he'd wielded minutes before. It was just Kai's voice again. It's a name on paperwork, a brand. It's not me. Isn't it? She asked, her voice trembling. The man who just dismantled my father's career with a sentence, the ghost who built an empire. That's not you. He reached for her hand, but she flinched, pulling back. The hurt that flashed in his eyes was genuine, and it undid her a little. The empire was built so I would never be powerless again, he said, his gaze intense, boring into hers. So that no one could ever take what mattered from me. I didn't hide it from you to deceive you. I hid it to protect us asterisk. The moment that world knew about you, you would have become a target, a pawn. Every conversation we had, every quiet moment would have been scrutinized, analyzed, weaponized. I just wanted to be Kai, the man who loved Alara Vance. Not the asset who needed to secure the Vance fortune. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and confused. All those times when my mother talked about maintaining yachts, when Julian mocked your vague promises, you were sitting there, knowing you could buy and sell them 100 times over. You let them humiliate you. You let me be humiliated. No, he said, his voice sharp, fierce. I never let them touch you, not really. Do you think Julian's smear campaign would have gotten any traction if I hadn't allowed it? I let him hang himself with his own rope. I let your father show you his true priorities. I needed you to see the world you were fighting for, Alara. I needed you to choose me not for my power but in spite of my perceived lack of it, because what we have. He gestured between them, his composure finally cracking, revealing the raw, desperate man beneath. This is the only thing I've ever been afraid of losing. It's the only thing that ever mattered. His vulnerability was a key, turning the lock on her anger. She saw it then, the fear in him, not of boardrooms or rivals, but of this, of her rejection. The most powerful man in the room was terrified of the woman sitting next to him. "The tea with honey," she whispered, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "The way you listened, that was real." A slow, relieved smile spread across his face, transforming him back completely into the man she knew. That was the only thing that was ever real. The rest, he shrugged, a gesture that was pure Kai. The rest is just noise. He reached for her hand again, and this time she let him take it. His thumb stroked her knuckles, a familiar, soothing rhythm. "I love you, Alara," he said, the words simple, stark, and utterly convincing. "I have loved you since the moment you walked into that stupid charity gala and told the event planner the floral arrangements were tacky. You were the only real thing in a room full of fakes, and I knew I would burn down every empire I had built if it meant I could keep you." The car had come to a stop. She hadn't even noticed. They weren't at his apartment. They were at a private airfield. A sleek, silver jet waited on the tarmac, its stairs lowered like an invitation. "Where are we going?" she asked, her mind reeling. "Anywhere you want," he said. "Just for a few days. Away from the cameras, the reporters, your father, Julian, just us. No secrets, no masks." He was giving her a choice. Again, just as he had from the beginning. He wasn't commanding her as Kairos Thorn. He was asking her as Kai. Alara looked from his earnest, open face to the jet, a symbol of a life so vast and powerful she could barely comprehend it. Then she looked back at their joined hands, at the simple, profound connection that had existed long before she knew any of this. She took a deep, shuddering breath and made her choice. Let's pause here in the quiet of that car. He's laid his soul bare. He's given her all the power. And she has to decide, does the truth change anything? Or does it just make the love more real? What would you do if the person you loved turned out to be a king in disguise? Would the crown feel like a gift or a chain? Think about that. Your answer tells you everything about what you value most. The private island was not what she had expected. It wasn't a garish monument to wealth with gold-plated fixtures and obsequious staff. It was a simple, beautiful villa built into the cliffs overlooking a turquoise sea. The air smelled of salt and frangipani. There were no phones, no computers, no outside world. For 3 days they were just Kai and Alara. He cooked for her, wearing a simple linen shirt and shorts, his feet bare on the cool tile. He showed her the secret coves he'd discovered, the underwater caves that glowed with bioluminescent plankton. They talked for hours, and for the first time he talked about his past. Not the business triumphs, but the pain. The foster homes, the struggle, the burning drive to create something that couldn't be taken away. "The name Kairos," he explained one night as they sat on the terrace, watching the stars, "is from an ancient Greek word. It means the right or opportune moment, the fleeting instant in which everything is possible. I chose it when I was 18. It was a reminder to wait for the right moment, not to rush, to be patient." He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "You were my Kairos, Alara, the moment I'd been waiting for my whole life." The love she felt for him didn't just remain. It deepened, solidified, transforming from a rebellious spark into an unshakable foundation. She saw the whole man now, the wounded boy, the brilliant strategist, the ruthless CEO, and the tender lover. And she loved every fractured, complicated piece of him. But back in the city, the world they had left behind was not so peaceful. Julian Ashworth, humiliated and financially crippled, was not a man who accepted defeat. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals are at their most dangerous. He had lost his fortune, his reputation, and the woman he considered his property. The public revelation that he had mocked and tried to destroy Kairos Thorn had made him a global laughingstock. His rage was a cold, calculating thing. He couldn't attack Kairos directly. The man was a fortress, but every fortress has a weakness. And Kairos Thorn's weakness was Ilara. Julian dug. He used every dirty contact, called in every favor from the underworld of corporate espionage. He wasn't looking for financial secrets anymore. He was looking for a chink in the armor, a scandal, a vulnerability. He found it in the form of a man named Silas. Silas had been Kairos's first partner, the one who had helped him build the initial algorithm. There had been a bitter falling out, a buyout that Silas had always claimed was coercive, backed by shadowy threats. It was a story that had been buried by legions of lawyers and the passage of time. But Julian unearthed it, and he found Silas, now a broken, alcoholic man living in resentment who was more than willing to talk, for a price. Meanwhile, Robert Vance, stripped of his board seat and watching his life's work be absorbed into the K-Quest behemoth, was also desperate. His pride had been annihilated. In his mind, his daughter had conspired with this usurper to ruin him. The love he might have once felt for her was now twisted into a bitter need for vengeance. When Julian came to him with his plan, Robert, in his shame and fury, didn't hesitate. He provided the inside knowledge of Alara's life, her habits, her vulnerabilities. The trap was set. Alara and Kai returned to the city a week later, refreshed and united. They were a team now. She moved out of her family's penthouse and into his world, a stunning, minimalist penthouse that overlooked the entire city, a testament to his success but now felt like their home. She began working with him, using her art history knowledge and social savvy to help shape the cultural philanthropy wing of K-Quest. They were building something new together. For a few weeks it was perfect. It felt like they had won. Then the first leak hit. It wasn't about business. It was more insidious. An anonymous blog post, riddled with supposed insider knowledge, began to weave a story. It painted Alara not as a victim of her family's cruelty, but as a cunning social climber who had known Kai's true identity all along. It suggested she had manipulated the entire situation, playing the poor, lovesick heroine to ensnare the world's most eligible billionaire. The comments were vicious. She's just as fake as the rest of them, gold digger of the century. He'll see through her soon enough. It hurt, but she and Kai laughed it off. Noise, he called it, kissing her forehead. Then came the second leak. This one was darker. Silas, his identity shielded, gave a heart-wrenching interview to a tabloid, detailing how a young, ruthless Kairos Thorn had threatened his family to force him out of their company. The story was embellished with lies, but it contained just enough nuggets of truth, specific dates, technical details to be believable. The narrative shifted. Kairos Thorn was no longer a brilliant visionary, he was a cutthroat monster, and Alara was his willing accomplice. The final, devastating blow came on the day of the inaugural gala for the K-Quest Art Foundation, Alara's pet project. It was to be her debut as a power in her own right. As she stood in her gown, ready to face the world with Kai by her side, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, a video file. With a sinking feeling, she opened it. It was security footage, grainy and black and white, from the night of her engagement party. It showed her and Kai in a shadowy corner of the terrace, away from the crowds. The audio was muffled, but a few phrases were clearly enhanced and subtitled. Kai's voice, just a little longer, let them have their party, soon it will all be ours. Her voice laughing, I can't wait to see their faces. The video was a masterful, malicious edit. Taken out of context, it looked like a conspiratorial celebration of their impending victory over her family. The conversation had actually been about his plan to take her traveling, to get away from them all. But no one would know that. The video went viral within the hour. The press dubbed it the conspirator's kiss. By the time she and Kai arrived at the gala, the story had metastasized. The cameras flashed, but the questions weren't about art. Alara, did you know who he was all along? Kairos, did you threaten your former partner? Is this entire relationship a business transaction? They pushed through the gauntlet, their smiles strained. Inside, the gala was a disaster. The very society that had once mocked her for loving a poor man now scorned her for supposedly scheming with a rich one. The looks were no longer of pity, but of disgust. And then she saw him, Julian Ashworth, standing across the room holding a glass of champagne. He didn't look angry or humiliated anymore. He looked satisfied. He raised his glass in a silent, mocking toast to her. In that moment, Alara understood everything. This was his work. He couldn't destroy Kai's empire, so he was trying to destroy their happiness. He was poisoning the one thing Kai valued above all else, his life with her. Kai's face was a mask of cold fury, his hand a vice around hers. He could handle corporate wars. He could handle financial sabotage. But this attack on her character, on the integrity of their love, this was a battlefield he wasn't prepared for. He leaned close, his voice a low, desperate whisper. "I will end him for this. I will tear his entire world down to the ground." And Alara saw it, the darkness in him that Silas had spoken of, the ruthless predator that had built an empire. It was real, and it was being unleashed because of her. A choice crystallized in her mind, sharp and terrifying. She could let Kai become the monster Julian was painting him as. She could let him wage a war that would consume them both in darkness, all to protect her. Or she could step into the line of fire herself. She looked at Julian's smug face, at the circling media sharks, and then at Kai, her love, who was ready to burn the world for her. And that's when I realized power always has a price. The roar of the gala faded into a dull, throbbing hum in Alara's ears. The crystals in the chandeliers seemed to shatter the light into a million accusing glints. She could feel Kai's rage, a live wire coursing through the hand that gripped hers, a promise of ruin. And she knew, with a chilling certainty, that if she let him, he would deliver it. He would become the villain in Julian's story to protect the heroine in his own. She turned to him, her voice a low, urgent whisper beneath the cacophony. "Kai, no." His eyes, dark and stormy, snapped to hers. "Alara, he crossed a line that doesn't exist. He doesn't get to touch you, not like this." "And if you end him, what then?" she asked, her gaze steady, though her heart felt like it was cracking. "You prove his point. You show the world that Kairos Thorn is the ruthless monster he says you are. You turn our love into a weapon. Is that what we are?" "He's trying to destroy you." The words were torn from him, raw and guttural. "Then let me handle it," she said, her voice gaining a strength that surprised even her. She gently extracted her hand from his. "This is my fight. Not with your money, not with your power, with my voice." Before he could stop her, she was moving. She didn't head for the exit. She walked towards the small, raised dais where a string quartet had been playing. The musicians, sensing the shift in the room's energy, faltered and fell silent. Every eye in the room followed her. The whispers died. Julian's smug smile tightened into a confused smirk. Robert Vance, standing miserably near the bar, watched his daughter with a dawning, horrible apprehension. Alara reached the dais and turned to face the crowd. The lights were blinding. She could see the sea of faces, curious, hostile, gleeful. She saw the journalists in the back, their cameras now trained on her like weapons. She took a deep breath, the microphone stand cool under her trembling fingers. "My name is Alara Vance," she began, her voice clear, carrying to the farthest corners of the room. It wavered only slightly. "And it seems there's a story you're all very interested in. A story about a poor man and a rich heiress. A story about a cunning plot and a ruthless billionaire." She paused, letting her gaze sweep over them, meeting their stares one by one. "It's a very good story. It has drama, betrayal, and a convenient villain, but it has one problem." Her eyes found Julian's across the room. "It's a lie." A ripple went through the crowd. "The man you see over there," she said, pointing directly at Julian, her voice sharpening. "Julian Ashworth fed you that lie. He took a private, beautiful moment between two people in love and edited it, twisted it, and sold it to you because he was humiliated. Because he lost. He couldn't accept that a woman he saw as his property chose a man he deemed unworthy, so he decided to punish us both. Julian's face was a thundercloud. "She's lying," he shouted, taking a step forward. "Am I Julian?" Alara's voice cut through his, cold as steel. "Then tell them. Tell them what we were really talking about on that terrace. Tell them about the plans we were making to leave this world of gilded cages and whispered insults. Tell them how you've been working with my own father to leak falsehoods about the man I love because your pride is more important to you than my happiness." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Cameras swiveled to Robert Vance, who looked as if he wished the floor would swallow him whole. Alara turned her attention back to the crowd, her voice softening, becoming more personal, more vulnerable. She was no longer addressing the mob. She was speaking to the human beings within it. "You all saw the first part of this story. You saw me mocked for loving a man without a fortune. You celebrated when he was revealed to have one, as if that was the happy ending, as if the money was what made it right. But you were wrong then, and you're wrong now." She looked at Kai, who was watching her, his expression one of stunned, fierce pride. Her anchor, her home. "I fell in love with Kai when he had nothing but his integrity and the code he wrote. I fell in love with his patience, his kindness, the quiet strength that had nothing to do with a stock portfolio. The man I love is the same man who stood in this very hotel and took your ridicule without flinching. He is the same man who built an empire from nothing to protect himself from a world that had been cruel. And yes, he is the same man who is fierce and ruthless when those he loves are threatened. But that doesn't make him a monster, it makes him human." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't wipe them away. They were her armor. "The truth is simple. I love Kairos Thorne, but I fell in love with Kai. The power, the money, the empire that was never part of the deal. It was the man. It was always the man." She let her words hang in the stunned silence. The narrative, so carefully constructed by Julian, lay in tatters at her feet, dismantled not by a corporate takeover, but by a simple, courageous truth. Then a new voice echoed through the hall. "She's telling the truth." A man stepped out from a side entrance. He was older, dressed in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, his face lined with regret. It was Sila's. Julian paled. "You were paid to stay away." "I was paid to lie," Silas said, his voice rough but clear. He addressed the room. "Julian Ashworth and Robert Vance paid me to fabricate a story about threats and coercion. The buyout was fair, more than fair. I was bitter and they preyed on that. Kairos Kai was always the visionary. I was just the mechanic. He never threatened me. He never threatened anyone." He looked directly at Kai, his eyes filled with a long-overdue apology. "I'm sorry." The dam broke. The story was dead, murdered by truth in a crowded ballroom. In the chaos that followed, the reporters swarming Julian and her father, the shocked murmurs turning to sympathetic applause for her, Kai finally reached her. He didn't say a word. He simply pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious, fragile thing in the universe. And yet, in that moment, he was the one clinging to her for strength. He leaned down, his lips close to her ear. "You," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "are the most powerful person I have ever known." The resolution was not a single event, but a quiet, inexorable tide. Julian Ashworth, exposed for libel, witness tampering, and conspiracy, saw his remaining reputation and family company evaporate in a series of lawsuits and shareholder revolts. He left the country, a ghost of the man he once pretended to be. Robert Vance, broken by his own complicity and his daughter's very public courage, appeared at her doorstep one rain-swept evening. He didn't ask for forgiveness for his business losses. He looked at the life she had built with Kai, a life not of cold corporate power, but of partnership and genuine happiness, and he asked for forgiveness for being a blind father. The road to reconciliation would be long and painful, but for the first time, it was possible. The media, having feasted on the scandal, now championed their love story. "The triumph of authenticity," the headlines now read. how a heiress and a billionaire found love beyond the ledger. One evening, months later, they stood on the terrace of their penthouse. The city lights spread out below them like a field of diamonds. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the peace they had fought so hard to win. "You never did answer my question," Kai said softly, his arm around her shoulders. "Which one?" "That first night after the gala. I asked if you thought love needed proof or just time to reveal itself." Alara leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the lights twinkle. "I think," she said slowly, "that love is the proof. The world demanded proof of your worth and you gave them K-Quest, but I never needed it. The love was the only proof I ever had. Everything else was just time." He turned her to face him, his eyes serious in the dim light. "I became K-Quest to build a fortress, Alara, to make sure no one could ever hurt me again. But I realize now, I did it all so I would be worthy of walking into a room and claiming the one thing that truly mattered. You." It was the final piece of the puzzle sliding into place. His entire journey, the secrecy, the patience, it hadn't been about revenge or power for its own sake. It had been a long, arduous path to her. Those who had once mocked her now looked upon them with a kind of reverent awe. They saw not just a powerful couple, but an unbreakable one. The apologies came, not because of his wealth, but because of her strength and their undeniable, authentic bond. The poetic justice was complete. Kai brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch infinitely gentle. "So," he whispered, his smile the one she had fallen in love with, the one that was only for her. "What happens now?" Alara smiled, rising on her toes to kiss him, a kiss that held the memory of every hardship and the promise of every tomorrow. "Now," she said against his lips, "we live. And so we leave them here in the quiet after the storm. The world tried to define their love by its price tag, but they proved its value was immeasurable. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? In your own life, when the world laughs at your choices, when it tries to tell you what your love is worth, will you have the courage to listen to your own heart? Will you trust that sometimes the richest love is the one you never see coming?" The city from this height was a silent, sprawling galaxy, but inside the penthouse the only universe that existed was the space between them. The echo of her words, "Now we live," hung in the air, a vow more binding than any contract. And they did. They lived in the quiet mornings, where the scent of coffee and code mingled in the sun-drenched kitchen. Kairos Thorne, the myth, would be hunched over his laptop, but he was just Kai stealing glances at the woman who had rewritten his destiny. They lived in the fierce, private debates about art acquisitions for the Foundation, where Alara's expertise met his strategic mind, not in a clash, but in a dance. They lived in the way he still made her tea with a drop of honey, a ritual that had survived the revelation of empires. The world continued to watch, of course, but the narrative had permanently shifted. They were no longer a scandal, they were a standard, a testament to the idea that the most powerful alliances were built not on mergers, but on mutual respect. Yet power, true power, is never a static thing. It's a current, and currents attract those who wish to swim and those who wish to drown you. The new challenge didn't arrive with a bang, but with a meticulously worded email. It was addressed to Alara, to her official Foundation address. Subject: regarding the provenance of Lot 42, Sapphire Depths. The email was from a renowned, notoriously ruthless art collector, Alastair Finch. He claimed that a painting Alara had just acquired at auction for the K-Quest collection, a stunning abstract piece that had spoken to her soul, had a questionable past. He hinted at Nazi looting, at a dark history buried beneath the vibrant blues and golds. He attached grainy photographs of ledgers and shipping manifests from the 1940s. The evidence was circumstantial, but potent. His demand was not for money. It was for a trade. He wanted a different, more politically significant piece from their collection, a piece Kai had secured in a landmark deal that had cemented his reputation as a cultural custodian. "This isn't about art," Kai said, his voice low as he read the email over her shoulder. It's a test. Finch has been trying to get his hands on that piece for years. He's using you to get to me. He's questioning your judgment, the integrity of your very first major acquisition. Alara felt a cold knot in her stomach. This was her world, her domain. She had staked her new professional life on her eye and her ethics. If this acquisition was tainted, it wouldn't just be a financial loss. It would be a humiliation that would undermine everything she was trying to build. It would prove to the silent, watching critics that she was just a pretty face playing in a league she didn't understand. The old Alara might have panicked. The one who lived in her father's shadow might have deferred to Kai, let him handle it with his legions of lawyers and his bottomless resources. But she was not that woman anymore. "I'll handle it," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Kai turned her to face him. "Alara, Finch is a shark. He's done this before. He finds a crack and he drives a wedge into it until the whole structure splits." "Then I won't give him a crack," she replied, her gaze steady. "This is my foundation, my acquisition, my reputation. I won't hide behind you." He saw the determination in her eyes, the same fire that had faced down a ballroom full of mockery. He nodded, a slow, proud smile gracing his lips. "Then tear him apart." Alara's investigation became an obsession. She buried herself in archives, hired independent researchers not connected to K-Quest, and followed a paper trail that led across continents. She discovered that Finch's evidence was, as suspected, a masterful forgery. But in the process of proving it false, she uncovered something else, something far more damning about Finch himself. She found a pattern, a series of acquisitions he had made over the decades, all of which had similar, faintly whispered rumors of a dark provenance attached to them, rumors he himself had likely started. He would force the original owners into panic selling to him at a fraction of the value. Then he would clear the artwork with his own discovered evidence, skyrocketing its value. He wasn't just a collector. He was a predator who fed on the fear and reputations of others. He had targeted her because she was new, because he thought she was the vulnerable entry point to Kai's empire. Instead of simply exposing his forgery, Alara set a trap. She arranged a private meeting with Finch in a neutral gallery space. She played the part of the concerned, slightly naive curator, worried about the foundation's reputation. Finch, a man with the cold eyes of a lizard and a smile that never reached them, took the bait. He oozed false sympathy. "These things happen, my dear. The art world is a murky place. A simple trade, it would make all this unpleasantness disappear." "It would, wouldn't it?" Alara said, her voice all sweet reason. She opened her portfolio. "But before we discuss that, I wanted to get your expert opinion on a few other pieces I'm considering. I've been doing so much research lately." She slid a series of documents across the table, not the forgeries he had sent her, but her own findings. Documents linking him to the creation of false provenances. Records of his shell companies, the panic cells he had engineered. It was all there, laid out with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Finch's smile vanished. His face went slack with shock, then tightened with fury. "You little." "The trade is off the table, Mr. Finch," Alara said, her voice dropping all pretense of sweetness. It was now as cold and sharp as polished steel. "But if you so much as whisper another unfounded accusation against my foundation, or look in my husband's direction again, every major auction house, museum, and Interpol unit will receive this dossier. You will be the one who is uncollectible." The power in the room had not just shifted, it had been inverted. The predator was now the prey, caught in a trap of his own design, sprung by the woman he had severely underestimated. He left the gallery a broken man, his reign of terror over. When Alara returned home, Kai was waiting. He didn't ask if she had succeeded. He could see it in the quiet confidence of her walk, the new, unassailable strength in her eyes. "You were right," she said, slipping off her heels. "He was a shark." A small, wicked smile touched her lips, But it turns out I'm a deeper ocean. He pulled her into his arms, laughing a deep, genuine laugh of pure admiration. In that moment, they were equals in every sense of the word. Not heiress and billionaire, but two warriors back to back, each guarding the other's flank. Their love was no longer a refuge from the world. It was the foundation from which they both could conquer it. Look at them now. Look how far they've come. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is the true measure of a partnership? Is it weathering the storm together? Or is it realizing that you are each other's calm and each other's storm? What kind of love are you building? One that hides from the world or one that changes it? The silence after a victory is its own kind of music. It's the sound of a battlefield gone quiet, the echo of a threat that has been utterly neutralized. For Alara and Kai, the defeat of Alistair Finch was more than just protecting an asset. It was a coronation. They had faced the world as a united front and emerged not just unscathed but stronger. Weeks melted into a season of profound, unshakable peace. The K-Quest Art Foundation, under Alara's leadership, became a powerhouse of both cultural prestige and unimpeachable integrity. Her name was no longer preceded by Vance Heiress or Kairos Thorne's wife, but stood on its own, Alara Thorne, a force in the art world. One crisp autumn evening, they found themselves walking through the sculpture garden of their foundation's new flagship gallery. The event was a soft opening, a quiet celebration before the grand public unveiling. The air was cool, smelling of fallen leaves and damp stone. Among the modern steel and glass structures stood one new, breathtaking piece, a massive, flowing bronze sculpture of two figures intertwined, so seamlessly merged it was impossible to tell where one began and the other ended. It was titled simply Kairos. They stopped before it, hands linked. "It's us," Alara whispered, her breath misting in the air. Kai squeezed her hand. "It always was." He turned to her, his face illuminated by the soft, strategic lighting of the garden. The sharp, corporate angles of Kairos Thorne had softened into the gentle, beloved lines of simply Kai. The man who had built fortresses now lived in a home, and the difference was everything. "There's something I need to show you," he said, his voice taking on a rare, nervous edge. "Something I should have given you a long time ago." He led her away from the crowd, through a private door and into the heart of the gallery, which was still and silent, the polished floors reflecting the moonlight streaming through the vast skylights. He stopped before a single painting, displayed on a velvet wall, lit by a solitary, perfect beam of light. It was the painting, Sapphire Depths, the one Finch had tried to use to break them. But it was different. Next to it on a small plaque was a new title. It read, "The proof was in the silence." Alara stepped closer, her heart thumping a strange, syncopated rhythm. And then she saw it. In the lower right corner of the canvas, hidden within the tumultuous, beautiful chaos of blue and gold paint, was a tiny, intricate signature she had never noticed before. A signature that wasn't the artist's. It was a K and an E, woven together with the same impossible grace as the bronze sculpture in the garden. "He did it the night after the gala," Kai said softly, coming to stand behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. "After you stood on that dais and defended us with nothing but the truth, I came here alone. I asked the curator to bring me the painting, and I added that because you were right. The love was the only proof we ever needed. This," he gestured to the tiny, hidden signature, "this was just for us, a secret for our fortress." Tears, warm and silent, streamed down Alara's face. This was not a grand, public declaration. It was a quiet, sacred vow painted in the dark. It was a testament to a love that no longer needed to perform for anyone. It was real, it was deep, and it was theirs alone. She turned in his arms, framing his face with her hands. "You once asked me if love needed proof or just time," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I have a new answer." He looked at her, his eyes full of a love so vast it seemed to fill the entire, silent gallery. "Love," she whispered, "just needs a witness, and you, Kairos Thorn, are mine. Their kiss was not one of frantic passion, but of profound, soul-deep completion. It was the final period at the end of a long, run-on sentence. It was the quiet victory after the war. As they stood there, wrapped in each other and the silence, the world outside ceased to exist. The mockery, the power struggles, the hidden identities, it had all been the forging fire. What remained was this unbreakable alloy of two souls who had chosen each other, again and again, against every odd. He had built an empire to feel safe. She had been raised in one to feel valued. And in the end, they both discovered that the only empire that mattered was the one they built together, not of stone and stock, but of trust, of vulnerability, and of a love that was, finally and completely seen. And so their story closes, not with a dramatic flourish, but with a quiet, resonating chord. They taught the world a lesson about wealth and worth, but more importantly, they taught each other about trust. So I leave you with this final question, the one that has hummed beneath every moment of their journey. In your own life, what are you building your empire on? Is it on what the world can see and measure? Or is it on the quiet, unseen signatures of love that you hide in the corners of your shared canvas? The answer, my dear listener, is the only fortune that truly matters.